Let's bring it right now, Mike Rogers. He's, of course, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Mike Rogers, this dispute, this war continues to grind on in Israel, and there are, boy, no winners here. What's the next step?
Well, I think if you look at Israel's perspective, I think they've shut over 35 different very sophisticated tunnels from Gaza into Israel. Their goal, I think, is to do two things. A is to disrupt their logistics for recreating rockets, so they build some of their own in Gaza that they fire into Israel. They also, we think, import some. We think Iran may be responsible for some of the weapon systems traveling into to Hamas in Gaza. And I think they want to make sure that that this tunneling is both found and destroyed and prevent the opportunity to do it moving forward. So that's where Israel comes from at this.
Right. I certainly understand that. I understand your support of Israel. I've been a supporter of Israel as well. But the continued images that are coming out of this area of Palestinian children and Palestinian women being killed in this fighting, and over 1,000 civilians, according to some reports, obviously that has an impact on Israel in the long run as well. This seems to be a no-win situation for the state of Israel, does it not?
Yeah, it's certainly complex, and you know, one of the troubling things about this is how Hamas has put their rocket systems in schools and in mosques and hospitals, and the only way to disrupt those rocket systems. And remember, they're firing these rockets into civilian population centers. If it weren't for the Iron Dome, the anti-missile system, it would be thousands and thousands and thousands of more civilian deaths, really on both sides. And that's what we've got to understand here. I think there's a path forward on this. If you take where Hamas wants to go, they need those open borders. But if we're going to agree to that, if the U.S. is going to be a part of that and Israel's going to agree to that, then it needs to be to make sure that humanitarian aid and only humanitarian aid gets through. It can't be about resupply of weapon systems and other things. And so it's an interesting dynamic, but that's why you're seeing this talk of rolling ceasefires, mainly because both sides are at a bit of an impasse with what their stated objectives are.
Chuck Todd.
Chairman Rogers, are you concerned that John Kerry, Secretary of State Kerry, and Prime Minister Netanyahu are just not on the same page? I mean, I'm finding it fascinating watching it looks as if his cabinet is taking Kerry proposals, spinning them in a different way than the way Kerry claimed that he was doing it. I mean, there seems to be a communications problem between John Kerry and Benjamin Netanyahu. How is this happening?
Well, I think there's always been a little bit of friction between Netanyahu and this administration, and I think early on some of the early ceasefire requirements didn't recognize, at least in Israel's perspective, they didn't recognize their security concerns about them continuing anti-tunneling operations during a ceasefire. And remember, these are tunnels that come into Israel, and so I think with that lack of consideration, I think they believed that they were kind of going this alone. Which made them take a little harder position on those things. So you're saying there was some miscommunication there.
I understand that you're saying this sort of as an observer. Now, you're a policymaker, you're a lawmaker. Are you comfortable with how John Kerry's handling this or not?
I was not comfortable with the initial leaks throwing out an agreement and saying that one side or the other rejected it. You know, those meetings ought to be in quiet until they can come up with an agreement that can be sustained by both sides. And I wouldn't talk about it. If it takes 2 or 3 days without any news coming out of that room, so be it. But now you're having this PR war between Hamas and Israel and the United States. That's just not a healthy place for us to be. They ought to lock them in a room, sit down, and try to work out the issues of which both sides need to have. Israel clearly needs to continue anti-tunneling and this ability to dismantle rockets in a way that doesn't take out civilians. And Gaza is desperate need of humanitarian aid. I think you can find an agreement there, but you can't do it in public, and you can't do it by leaking one side, knowing that both sides of that equation are going to use that for their own purposes.
Congressman Mike Rogers, thank you very much.